up, so just
Yes,
show up.
right, that's right.
Show up and
Just-
see my friend Roxy. So.
Okay, great. It is September 29th, 2001. This is Elizabeth Townsend for Dean Massaro's Preparing for the Lives in the Law Project, and we are interviewing Steve Hirsch. We'll start with the first question, which is, why did you go to law school, and was it what you expected when you got there?
The answer to the second question is no, not at all. I found, Elizabeth, that, is it okay to use your name on these, or would that have to be?
That's fine.
Okay. I found, Elizabeth, that there were a couple of different categories, loosely two categories of people in law school. Those who had been groomed by parents or other external societal pressures to be lawyers since they were in grade school. They would take the Princeton Review for the SATs, before college, and then they would take all the LSAT review courses, and they would be all nauseated before the LSAT and this and that, and would have sweaty palms the first day of law school. Then there were those of us who never had a plan to go to law school or much of a plan for anything. The reason I went to law school was my then girlfriend, now wife of 22 years, thought saw in me something I didn't see, and that is I could live out a little higher purpose and do a little better in society than what I was striving to do, which was to be a sports writer. And she literally forced me to take the LSAT, which I took, and I think because of the lack of pressure and not even caring what the results were, I did fine. And with my undergrad GPA, I remember the shock to this day opening the mail and learning I had gotten into U of A Law School. I only applied to U of A and ASU. And I'm an Arizona boy, so I had no aspirations to go elsewhere, no Ivy League aspirations or anything like that. And I decided to go for it. Didn't have anything else to do, basically. And that put me in hindsight in a very good path, because there wasn't nearly as much pressure. I was doing it because I wanted to, and I very quickly found that it was something I liked. It was fun. The first year wasn't great, but I did see it through.
Why wasn't the first year great?
Well, I was a journalism major, and that is still a great department at the university. It is very hands-on. That's why it's so great. It's taught by journalists, still maintain pretty close ties with the department, and you don't have homework. You go and cover the city council meeting or the Planning and Zoning Commission, or you go do a feature story on the barrio or whatever. And then you, like all journalists, go out and drink beer and smoke cigarettes, and I wasn't at all used to having to regiment myself to briefcases and be prepared. And it only took a couple of weeks of getting caught below the belt by, in my day, Professor Ayers, of course, but Tom Schuessler, Ray J. Davis, who taught torts in the late 70s. Dean Henderson had just come on board. Dan Dobbs was there. These were folks you didn't just wander into class unprepared for. So I soon found that I had to get myself focused and regimented, and that was a bit of an unfun part of it, but I developed some skills I maintain to this day in terms of speed reading, quickly analyzing things. Journalism had taught me a lot of that too. And once I got over that hump and started to form some interpersonal relationships in the back rows of the respective classes among other folks who weren't sure what they were doing there, it worked out great, and I maintain those friendships to this day. In fact, in about 3 hours we'll be driving south to the football game, and I'll be hooking up with a bunch of buddies I made the first day of law school in August of 1977. So
That's pretty cool.
absolutely.
It wasn't what you expected. You said no to the second question. What was?
I guess, in my view, and maybe this has softened and changed somewhat, I thought it would be more of a philosophy-driven curriculum, more exchange of great ideas and thoughts, and instead it was more power memorizing case results, especially in the first year. and statutes and being able to repeat memorized mantras on tests in order to achieve good grades. And as I'm sure we'll talk about, that's part of success in practice, but it's only a small part. What I think it did, although we didn't know it at the time, was reshuffle the deck of analysis and skills that had got you through undergraduate school and got you thinking kind of on a new paradigm of how to deal with problems and issues, got you thinking like a lawyer. And I know the school has made great strides since I went there in this regard and has significantly tuned up its faculty and its whole approach to this. But at the time, it wasn't at all what I expected. I guess I thought we would go right to the coffee talk sessions at Park Center where we talked about great philosophical shifts in products liability law or con law or something like that. And it wasn't. The first year was just a grind to get through the rudiments of contracts and criminal procedure and torts and jurisdictional issues and things like that. And then you kind of came up for air and began to think the great thoughts. So that was the biggest difference.
Do you think that you need that first year? Do you think that's something that still needs to be done? I mean, as you see new young ones come out, is that an important part of being a lawyer, going through that process?
I'd have to defer to the great educational minds and the legal theorists on that. It seems to produce people who are otherwise bright and driven. It seems for the right people in the right mix to turn them into good legal analysts and strategists, which is in the litigation world what's important. So if you start with a woman or a man who is bright and driven and has fire in their belly, you might say, in terms of doing something in this world in any direction, it's still important to break down some of those processes and then build them back up again in a rational way of thinking. So I might be in the minority, but I would still be a proponent of that, and I don't know that anyone's ever come up with a better way of doing it. I do think it's more humane. I know it's more humane, and there's much more togetherness, more peers pulling for each other. When I'm involved at the school from time to time, we'll talk to first years. It's just much more of a humane system, and it was fairly humane in my day. When I'm about 20 years out now, when I was starting and talked with 20-year out graduates, it was terrible. I mean, it was the sink or swim philosophy, and they'd over-admit and then call out, and that clearly didn't work. So I think the school, from my perspective, admits a much better profile of students in terms of the usual statistical measurements, and that translates into a more diverse, homogeneous, more prepared, just more together group, I think, that comes in. And a lot of those negative ties of competition and backstabbing and all of that have been reduced, if not eliminated. I don't know, I'm not prowling the halls anymore, but they were basically a thing of the past in 1977 when I wandered in the old school over on Park myself. So.
All right, I have two questions. First,
Yeah.
do you think that maybe, how do I phrase this, if it's a kinder, gentler law school, that it becomes a kinder, gentler profession because you have camaraderie, that it is, or do you think it's the antithesis? I mean, if you had everyone talks about sort of, the old timers always sort of are, everything's going, So how does that translate once you get out, if you're in your school environment to your work environment?
Well, I'll tell you this, and I really believe it, and I see it in the new students coming out and joining me in practice. If you are prepared, ethical, kind-hearted, practice the golden rule, trusting of your common person, you will thrive in law like you would in sales or accounting or investment banking or anything else. You will thrive. You will be able to, especially in the Arizona legal community, quickly become known for that. And you'll have success and quality of life and everything else that comes of it. People don't act like jerks and fall into the stereotype of the negative, bitter lawyer that's backstabbing because of something they learned in school. Nor does the school, well, the school doesn't turn them into that, in other words. Nor do I think people who are predisposed to that suddenly become ethical and open individuals because they take a class in law school. But the biggest message through the School of Hard Knocks for 21 plus years I can give is play on the skills that got you to where you are. Be trusting in your fellow professional colleagues. There's no way you can take ethics and hear Professor Maue talk about a case result or talk about how things work in practice and then just walk in and be there. You have to go through it a few times. You have to get nailed on a verbal agreement that the other side skewers you on to advance a little bit, to learn when to trust and when not to trust. The main thing you have to do is to practice a few years, and this is what's hardest for new lawyers. You have to earn that cachet. You have to earn a reputation and a name that you can be trusted, and that the colleagues you've surrounded yourself with in your agency or your firm can generally be trusted. And you have to immerse yourself in activities that will get you known outside the construct of writing letters and battling in the trenches, bar activities, pro bono activities, giving back to the law school, whatever you choose to do, so that there's a social fabric that is established, and the ties of trust and communication open up, and then the need to act and react so violently and vitriolically in letter writing campaigns, etc., evaporates. And you get much better work done quicker, more cheaply for your clients, which is what the bottom line is to succeed in practice.
All right, one more question on that area. There's a lot of writing and a lot of talk about, whether law school should be about practice, more clinic work, more
Right.
practical experience, and people complaining that students don't know anything when they get out, versus sort of the core work or more philosophical spaces, or more specialty. There's the other one side. You should specialize as opposed to be general. Do you have thoughts about that?
I'll tell you a little story. I was down taking a series of depositions in the early 90s, mid-90s. The record will tell whenever Joel came on campus. And I'd heard of a new dean that the school had brought in. None of the kind of rank and file grads had really a chance to meet him. I was outside the selection process and all of that. So I wandered over to the law school and wandered back toward the dean's office and saw a distinguished figure kind of in cutoffs, a cotton shirt, unloading boxes. And I said, "Can you direct me to the new dean?" And of course it was Joel. And he said, "Yes, I'm right here." So we chatted, and he said, "I want to get to know you. I want to learn more about Phoenix in particular and the big firms in Phoenix. And can we have breakfast tomorrow?" And I said, "Sure." So we had breakfast the next day, and it was about as intense of a breakfast as I've ever held, ever attended, ever. He peppered me with questions about the big firms, about fundraising, about the direction of the school, the perception of the school among graduates, and we touched on this issue. And I told him then that I thought the variety of student that was being turned out, that the pendulum had swung, was still swinging a little too much in the direction of philosophy and great thoughts, and not enough in practical skills. I've come off of that a bit in the ensuing 6, 7, 8 years. Writing skills predominate, and the schools made great strides in that area. We had very little to speak of. It was almost a throwaway in the late 70s. Writing was meshed in with library skills, and it was given very short shrift. Your first semester, it was never discussed again, and consequently, if you didn't have strong writing skills coming in, your writing skills literally deteriorated during law school because you were reading cases that had awful language and long words and long sentences and everything that we have to avoid out in practice. I think the last several deans, going back to Tom Sullivan and maybe even back further, have emphasized writing. And I can't underscore enough to all the participants in this class and the viewers of this tape how important it is to focus on writing skills. And to a large extent, at this stage, you either got it or you don't in terms of what you've done undergraduate school and the like.
When you mean,
Yeah.
when you mean writing, do you mean sort of your style, the grammar, sort of the basic core writing, or do you mean how you put things together analytically, or do you mean the form, like a pleading, or is it all of it when you mean writing skills?
I mean the first two of the three you mentioned. The form, how you do it, that's going to vary by where you're working and what the dictates of the particular area of practice or agency or firm you're with. That's minutia. It is basically the first part of that. Let's just string words together accurately and have the grammar be accurate, and not have longer than 20-word sentences, and never use there tos and here and aboves or comes now or anything like that. And then of course the analytical thought, and that's kind of the reshuffling of the deck we talked about that happens during the first year. That's a deeper level of writing. I'm really talking about the superficial level of having coherent words put down on paper. That is the strongest practical issue we can do. Beyond that, there are issues you can pick up and will pick up once you get into practice. Example, Joel and I talked about this, that August hot breakfast over at the Arizona Inn. We were outside because they were doing construction. Do you hammer the Arizona Rules of Civil Procedure, which we did? Everybody took Charles Marshall Smith, Smitty, on the Rules of Civil Procedure. And you were expected to know what the length of paper was in Greenlee County, what the default periods were in Mojave County or whatever when you went through that class. This was basically a second-year class after you took General Civil Pro and did Pennoyer v. Neff and all of that. My sense is, with Smitty's passing and just the kind of nationalization of the curriculum, that has totally fallen out. My initial reaction would have been, that's a problem. But now I've softened a bit on that. I think it's just as well to turn out a student who has a general conceptual comfort with how the rules interrelate with the statutes and some of the concepts behind service of process, concepts behind discovery, concepts behind jury trials, motions for summary judgment, and post-trial and appellate proceedings. And then we can hammer home to them how many days you have to file a petition for review, or how you process a default or something like that. So I guess...
What made you change? You said it twice. Yeah.
I was, I guess in my earlier days, I was more focused on having ready-made litigators, which has been my area, stamped out, hitting the ground out of school. My answer to your question is this: I've come to realize that for all the focus on the time frames and the 5 methods of revoking a will in Arizona, we literally had a professor that made us memorize that. That is taking valuable time and brain resources away from reshuffling the deck and rebuilding it up as to greater analytical skills. And by definition, if you're doing well in school and you've gotten into school, you're going to have the academic or intellectual horsepower to pick up the nuts and bolts of how many days you have to do this. I'd rather have somebody who has excelled in developing analytical and thinking skills through kind of a higher thought process of their school experience than just memorizing and regurgitating the 5 ways to revoke a will. So maturity, I guess, has taught me that I'm just as happy taking on somebody who's less practically trained in the nuts and bolts of civil procedure and more worldly and more analytically sound, and let us take them and build them into what we need them to be depending on their area of practice.
Okay, so let's say I'm a student. I am a student. So let's say that I'm coming to you for the summer, and I really want to do litigation, and I really want you to like me and like my work, but I'm not sure exactly how to make sure that I know what I need to know before I get there. What if you could have like the perfect student of like what they would have known before they got to you? What would you say?
Right.
I mean, they've only got a year because they usually come after their second year, right?
Yes.
So what do you do?
They have their first year of just mind-numbing deck reshuffling, okay, and then the second year they have some electives. They can emphasize writing skills, do some moot court, do some extracurricular stuff that might be good. Those who go in that direction will start law review stuff, etc. Basically we're interviewing people just beginning their 3rd semester, so they're not even sure what they're going to be doing that year. So here's my answer to your question. Back to the baseline construct. Be yourself, be ethical, kind, love life, have your feet on the ground, be focused on what you're doing but don't have it consume you, and come in and be comfortable, move comfortably, do the best you can at the work, but go out and play softball or drive up to the Grand Canyon or listen to music or do whatever you do, and demonstrate to me that you will fit in my world, in a world where you're working hard, probably too hard, but you're playing hard, you're enjoying what you're doing, the client interests are penultimate, and that you'll just fit in and you'll be worth our investment in you to bring you along and teach you what color of clothes to wear in Greenlee County and who the judges are in Apache County and how you get a TRO through the Maricopa County Superior Court and things like that. The people who attract me, and I'm right in the middle of interviewing them as we speak, had 2 yesterday, and who end up thriving in the process and becoming long-term players at the firm and having successful lives and careers are folks who apply themselves to what they're doing, don't get overly stressed out, have that baseline level of comfort. It's not without stress. No one walks in and just easily maneuvers, like I'm saying, but are comfortable, still spring out of bed in the morning. I tell this to our younger people too, with a zeal for what they're doing and a desire to get into the office, some mornings accepted obviously, but to do what rings your chimes. And hopefully it's a connection that builds into a process that every day you have a spring in your step, because more of what you're doing is ringing your bells or chimes than unringing them. And that's a successful relationship. We have some people who don't thrive in that relationship. There's nothing wrong with that. They're better suited for other things. We have bright, driven young lawyers who have started with us, who have gone on to become executive directors of major pro bono projects. And they love doing that. The big firm lifestyle wasn't for them. We have people who leave the practice of law. We have people who go solo. We have people who go into agencies, get plucked off to do in-house work. We have an active part-time program, and some people just choose to do that. I'm really going far beyond your question here, but the days of success or failure gauged by do you make partner in 6 or 7 or 8 years, those are gone. No one does that anymore. No one walks through, I would say statistically less than 3% follow the quote trend of 20 years ago. Undergrad, straight through law, graduate law school, 24 years old, go to work for a big firm, just beat your brains out to make partner, and just work happily ever after, and have a beautiful, thriving family and the whole bit. It just doesn't happen. The pressures are too tough. Statistically, it's obvious. People are not going right from undergrad to law school. They're having other careers. You can, not in the room where people are watching this, but you can look to your left and look to your right. I mean, I know the statistics, and that enriches the law school experience. It wasn't the case 25 years ago when I started in law school. We had basically, and we were about a 50-50 class gender-wise, so we had young women, young men who were coming right out of undergrad and just blindly marching right through law school like I did. Very odd to have somebody who had had another career. Could count on less than one hand women who had had families. Maybe 1 or 2 military retirees, males.
And when it's just for the future.
Sure.
When was your?
I started in 1977 and graduated in 1980. Okay, so that part of the matrix has been blown away. Okay, you start right with a big firm and just flower into success. That doesn't happen that often. It's extremely tough on relationships. It's tough on marriages. Nor are the big firms set up to simply have you make partner and grind out, with administrative and recruiting and everything else, 2,500 to 3,000 hours a year and just crank through. And you either do that or you're out. There wouldn't be big firms if that was the case. People don't stand for that anymore. So increasingly, students are going into a world where they can elect out of the partnership track and still be compensated well and be heroes within their firm and be a productive part of the enterprise and not scorned or looked down upon. They can
Okay, before you,
they
I'm
can
gonna
do
ask-
part-time, they can
Right.
do all sorts of things because we recognize that's the only way to move the enterprise forward.
Let's talk a little bit about those options so students understand
Okay.
what that means.
Sure.
By opting out of the partnership track, what happens?
I'll give you a generic answer that's based both on the way our firm does it and the way I understand the industry is really doing it, to use that term. Now we're getting a little bit into the financial business end of things. Now, as a journalism major, emphasizing my second and third years in remedies with Dobbs and federal jurisdiction and a little bit of criminal law with Wexler, none of this was even within the realm of my understanding. I hadn't even taken a math class since high school, so you walk into this world and you eventually catches up with you after years and years. It is tremendously difficult to walk in and from a dead start with no clients build yourself into somebody that will become an owner of the business of your firm, whether it's a large firm or a medium-sized firm, or I suppose for that matter a small firm. People will not realize where their strengths lie. And in my day, it was pretty much expected that you do that or you were a failure and you were washed out. Totally dumb way of doing things. We have people who are brilliant writers, analysts, but they would not be the type of people, they don't spend their evenings out cultivating client relationships or speaking at seminars or doing all the marketing things you need to rainmake, to bring in the business. Those people in the modern world are not going to be partners by and large of the larger firms. They are not going to have an ownership piece of the business, which simply means that as the firm's revenues go up, you have a percentage of that. If the firm's revenues are flat or go down, terrorism activities occur, things flatten, global things happen in your London office or your Abu Dhabi office that you have no control over, you're still affected by it financially. There is nothing wrong with that, I guess, is the big difference of what I'm saying. Those people are on, they elect out of the partnership track. We have expectations in terms of when they're in the office, how much work they're doing, what types of work they're doing. Across the board, high quality demands and client service demands. That doesn't change for anybody, from the receptionist when you walk in the door to the senior partner. But certainly the world has changed, and for the better, not to have this maniacal focus on you're either partner or you didn't make partner and you're out. That is a tremendous loss of legal talent, of service to the client. It's a disservice to the human beings in the profession and in the office. Does that answer your question in terms of some of the options? I mean, let me address a couple other ones. People will come in, they will like what they're doing, they will dislike joining boards, commissions, economic development, corporate committees, moving and grooving with the corporate types, or getting involved in bar association activities, interacting with judges, so you develop a little bit of a name and a cachet you can sell to an institutional client who may come in and want somebody like that. But they love coming in, reading the Wall Street Journal, eating a muffin at their desk with the phone not ringing, then deciding to log on and just power working from 9 to 6, and then they go home with their kids. And they don't go to the city council meeting or stay up with witnesses working on the next day or something. There is a tremendous place for people like that. And those people will not be partners. They will generally be designated counsel or of counsel or staff attorney. Compensated handsomely. Very valuable part of the team. They have face time with clients. They're part of the strategy. They just don't have the pressure of producing X million dollars in revenue of new business coming in or maintaining existing relationships. Okay, let's talk about the part-time type of practice. Why would it aid our enterprise to have a student come in, a woman who wants to have a family, brilliant, bright, ethical, happy, well-adjusted, feet on the ground, comfortable, everything I spoke of, and have us tell her 3 years into it, when she wants to have a child, okay, you're out, because you will not make your billable minimums, or you will not be here enough days of the week or something. At that point, we have trained the person, we've taught them the rules of civil procedure, they know how the general services work, they know how to log on in our system, they've gotten to know a fair number of people in the office and in other offices, they're talented. It is absolutely, from a very blunt economic perspective, idiotic and suicidal to cut that person loose. So any sophisticated group of people will say, we will offer you a part-time relationship with us, where you set the hours, you have your life outside of the office, we adjust compensation accordingly, we adjust partnership track if you're still desirous to get back on that track at some point accordingly, we make a written deal that's flexible, because neither side to the transaction really knows how it's going to work ever, and we go forward. And in most cases it's worked beautifully. In some cases, and I always say this, having recruited literally dozens, if not more than 100 women over the years, you never quite know how the baby track is going to work. You have women who you would expect would be back in 5 weeks, thirsting to get back to the billable hour gods, who decide never to come back. And then you have women who you would think you really have low odds of seeing them again, striving to come back, and they pull it off. We're sitting here in the offices of Roxy Bacon, a woman I absolutely admire for having pulled it off raising 2 beautiful daughters, first female state bar president. Earlier in my life, a key leader in my law office, and just a super individual. It takes a very special person, male or female, to be able to pull that off. But you have to allow people that flexibility to come along. From the male side of the fence, you may have stay-at-home dads for a while. When you have a female who's happens to have hit the home run and is in investment banking, accepts the offer with a big firm, and the dad accepts the offer with the AG's office or something like that. Happens all the time in practice. And you have to be flexible with that. Why would you lose that person's talent and ambition and drive and the investment you have into them? So these are the options that are available now that weren't 20 years ago. And I think the profession's going to continue in that direction.
That's very nice and very hopeful. I think it's one of the best things we've seen. Like we're nearly at end of like 40 interviews, and you're the first one.
It's true.
Do you think that your philosophy is? I mean, is it specific to your firm, or do you think that why aren't we hearing more about this? I guess is my question.
Well, you know, I don't want to turn this into an advertisement for Brian Cave. Some of it is firm directed. We are a national firm, international firm, with 18 offices spread all over the world. This is the world vision of the future, where we're coming in the practice of law, in the practice of accounting, investment banking, everything else. This is the world. It's not 20 years ago where up and out philosophy reigns and you just grind out on billable hours only. Those enterprises, I think, are doomed to fail eventually. They certainly are doomed to have a lower quality of life, and ultimately lower productivity and lower profit margins and everything else, which is ironically exactly what they're trying to achieve by just having a whip-cracking mentality across the board. So some of it is driven by an international outlook on human relations, larger firms, and there's several here in the state. Certainly if the students choose to go to a coastal practice, New York or LA, San Francisco, they'll see more of this. Those firms have the resources to be working with the consultants and the human engineers and you know, outside firms that come in and work with us, and we have retreats to talk about all of this. That doesn't happen with ABC, you know, mid-sized law firm in Tucson or Phoenix. They may read about it in the trade journals, but it's kind of a foreign world to them. So some of it, I'm lucky enough to be associated with a group of people that truly is a priority and you truly focus on it. It's not unique to big firms, though. There are several so-called medium-sized firms who have that as part of their credo. But it starts with the leadership core in the office deciding that that's what we want to do. Now, is it exclusive of the people who go into the more time-honored track of beating their brains out and living it all and flaming out and billing big hours and bringing in big clients? Absolutely not. You likely need to have those people in the enterprise. We have people who have long-term marriages, thriving families, and you wouldn't believe it. I mean, they are working in excess of 3,000 hours per year. I've never been able to been one of them. They bring in huge amounts of business. They live on their Palm Pilots. The high-tech world has ushered all of this in. They can work productively but still have family time on weekends and evenings. And it is just a 24/7 lifestyle. And there's people watching this in the class that are excited hearing this. And I was one of them. And it is a blast. If you pull it off, it is just a blast. It will be fun beyond your wildest dreams. You'll travel the world. You'll rub shoulders with the elite of business and enterprise. And you'll make money beyond what you ever thought you did. And it's really fun. But you have to want to really do that. And in a larger enterprise, you'll have a core of lawyers who will be in that mold. Okay? You'll also have a core of lawyers who are repelled by that concept. But like I say, you don't want to wash them out. You've got to set up an enterprise structure so that so that there's room for those folks.
How does that work within the environment of the office? I mean, is there a respect between people who are, or is there a sort of a snitches, sort of elitist, sort of the people who are there long? Do you know what I mean? Like, how does
Yeah,
that work?
that are there later at night. Is there
Right.
resentment toward the person who
Right.
goes home to pick up the
Or-
kids from school at 2:30?
Right, that everybody's making these different choices, but is there
Right.
an environment that accepts those choices?
Okay, 20 years ago, there was not such an environment. There was resentment, there was outrage, there was an environment that invited undercutting and backstabbing and just resentment. Again, because of the way the world is going and the type of talent that's coming into our profession and just the general shift of society, you can't live by that anymore. I bet you've had people sit here and bitch, frankly, about Generation X and the fact that they don't care about loyalty anymore, or all they care about is me, and they just want to take the money and run, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, have I thought that? Yes. You know, the student coming in, it's always kind of the good old days syndrome. My group of friends, men and women getting out of school, wanted to excel, get the type of jobs we wanted. Most of us were shooting for big firm types of jobs, and that mythical track we talked about. Okay, along the way, very few achieve it, they kind of fall out. But there was a sense much more then of wanting to link up with a firm and then just die at your desk. You know, 40 years into it with a gold watch and maybe having gotten a couple of awards or something along the way. The fact is that's not the case anymore. Okay, is that cause for just banging the table in frustration and saying, you know, GD, these young kids, and to heck with them all? No, you still need new lawyers coming in. They're going to be running your firm. Guess what? You're going to be out to pasture or 6 feet under at the time they're in management and they're dealing with recruiting and they're dealing with hiring and firing and pushing people for partner and dealing with you know, people behind closed doors in your office in tears because their marriage is falling apart or their mom is dying or something like that. So you need to get into their minds and have the whole enterprise shift to focus on what reality is. There's just as many positive attributes to the newer generation thought processes as there are negatives, just as there were with my generation. You know, the me generation probably means more focus on yourself in terms of quality of life, more focus on the family, more focus on the world and your community than just individually making as much money as you can. All those things are great. We have to celebrate them and grab them and make them work within the enterprise.
So you think that the nature of law and the practice of law changes with generational pressures of each generation coming in and sort of reacting to what they want and and that's just part of it, and that in some way Brian Cave is hearing those voices and sort of hearing the way the world is changing, and that's part of what the law needs to do, is to hear those voices and hear sort of that we're a more global world, those sorts of things. Do you think that's,
you know, you've got to keep in mind, this is a Arizona boy, a journalism major that's slumped through U of A in its earlier days, and it's just, you know, humbly ground out a litigation practice over 20 years. I don't have any of the stripes or experience to address those huge questions, but my sense is yes. Now I could give you 5 names of people who have left our firm who would come in and say, no, it was way too much of a pressure cooker, it wasn't what Hirsch is saying, etc. So don't get me wrong, this isn't some great Brian Cave sort of thing. I am telling you the firms that seem to be growing and thriving and expanding in this topsy-turvy world, not just in the lawyer profession, but in all professions, seem to have their eye on this ball more than the ones who don't. Okay, now, having disclaimed my ability to address any of this, I will. I think absolutely, whether it's law or business or anything else, the course of the business of that particular profession or line of work is dictated by the philosophies of those who are engaged in it. The older generation when I started was kind of the GI generation. There were still overtones of World War II. There was great love of country. There was only a culture of die at your desk. Men came out of World War II. They got a job, or they're educated on the GI Bill. They got a job, and they worked for 40 years and got a gold watch. The wives stayed at home, raised families. Dwight Eisenhower in 1950, etc. Okay. How does that work? Well, they look at my group coming out in the 70s and early 80s, and they see equivalent numbers of men and women in the law school class. They see the beginnings of a focus on what's best for the individual and the family, not necessarily the good of the enterprise. And change starts to result. Okay, now it's year 2000 and beyond. We see our parents who have been riffed after 25 years with the same company. We see global mergers and acquisitions that result in total washouts of people's careers and everything they fought for. So there's a natural, not only unwillingness to fall into that, there's a distrust of the system and the institutions. So almost now, if we see someone who has 10 years with the same firm, it's like, whoa, this is a little unusual. Let's look behind what happened here. Whereas 20 years ago, if someone had come in and had been with 3 firms in 6 or 7 years, we wouldn't even talk to them because there was that disloyalty problem. That just isn't the world anymore. So if that means, the profession has to move and meld to change the philosophies of the majority of the people who are coming into it. And if the bright and driven people formed by all those societal pressures are less institutionally loyal, then we can't just swear about it under our breath. We have to deal with it. We have to make our world a natural resting place, a comfortable resting place for them for as long as they choose to be with us, which hopefully is for the long run. But it probably isn't under the current mode. So you deal with it. I quit probably finally 2 years ago, but even longer ago than that, being personally torn up and distraught when one of my recruits decided to go elsewhere. For a while, it was a devastating personal blow. It just upset me horribly. For weeks, when somebody that I nurtured, interviewed them on campus their second year, was their mentor during their summer with us, cultivated them, promoted them within the firm, made sure they were getting good work, got them into court, smoothed their feathers, comforted them when they lost, exalted with them when they won, and then after 5 years of that they come in and say, oh, I can make $5,000 more down the street, so bye. Absolutely, anyone in my office can tell you it just really hit me hard. Okay, well, the initial reaction is to heck with it. I'm going to go close the door of my office, withdraw from recruiting, withdraw from firm administration, just crank out my own work and be done with it. Okay, that's a short-sighted and dumb way of dealing with it. You have to begin to appreciate the reality. So you read up on it, you go to a few seminars. Again, I'm lucky enough to be with an outfit. We've had whole multi-day retreats on this, where we've had cutting-edge people come in and say, you white men manager types, wake up. This is what's happening. Here was the GI generation. Here was the 60s and 70s, the baby boomers, exactly. And now here's the Gen Xers. And then here's Gen Y, Gen Zers coming up. And I've got 2 teenage boys now, so I'm tapped into their culture and what's happening. So you have to modify where you're coming from, or you will implode and fall apart. So now I try not to burn bridges. I'm proud to say I think the people leaving almost are more torn up than I am about it. I try to keep the bridges built. What goes around comes around. That may be a judge I'm facing someday. It will likely be a referrer of work back and forth between our respective, now different firms. At a minimum, I want it to be someone to have warm memories of me and my family and their years working with me. And there's just no other way to approach it. Now, maybe I'm unique in that regard. I don't think so. I mean, my world of practice is by and large populated with people who think in that direction. And I mean opposing counsel. I tend to work with people who have been successful within their firms. We all think alike. We can do the telephone stipulations. We tend to be on the same pro bono boards, commissions, maybe work outside the law on the same sorts of pursuits, Boy Scouts or church activities or whatever, and it just results in a very satisfying, still high stress, still, we'll talk about a day in the life, dawn to dusk sort of relationship, but at the end of it, what this whole thing is about is the same thing that you all are experiencing in school right now, and that's the camaraderie, the human contact, the the too late at the Stumble Inn or the shanty or whatever, the buffet was my hangout. That doesn't change. Pretty soon it's the Biltmore and it's fine cigars or it's fancy dinners or whatever than it was the graham crackers we were eating during law school, but it's still the same upstrokes you get from doing good things and doing good work. Things don't change as they did from we were a baby in the cradle in terms of feeling better about ourselves when we win something, or acclaim of a client, or your profession, or getting awards, whatever, although different people are driven by different things. So again, it gets back to that grounding of comfort, ethics, being comfortable with yourself, and just moving forward. So anyway, that was probably one of the longest-winded answers you've gotten in this series.
That's great.
If you're so you're interviewing with a firm, so you're coming out of school, you're interviewing with a firm. Do you ask them questions about part-time stuff, or do you shoot right into the firm, thinking you're going to do full-time stuff, or making them believe you're going to do full-time, and then say, look, I'd rather do a part-time thing? Would you be punished for doing something like that?
It depends on the firm. Our program is set up with the thought that you will come in knowing we have this array of options, but we pretty much want you to go full-time, and we're mindful. Let's say you have an existing family and you're a mom with 2 kids. Now, we meet all the DOL guidelines, we don't ask about all that, but obviously when we spend the summer with you, your kids are up running around and the whole bit, usually with our kids. And we're very frank about that. We just talk and say, okay, what are your expectations? We have women right now who are saying, what, those little appendages, I'll see them on the weekends. Throw me into that work. I want to rule the world. And they are there till all hours. Now, they're usually lucky enough to have significant others or husbands or whatever that are playing the child care role. We have other women who, after a couple years under their belt, say, okay, I now kind of have this down. I kind of know the dynamics. I'm comfortable where I am. I want to get the kids off, come in at 9, and leave at 4:30 or 5. And my husband works, and we'll just have, Grandma is there, I want to go relieve her by 6, so I want to be out here every day. We have a number of people in that category, male and female, by the way. That's fine, but the answer to your question is, we are looking, we're not looking for blood oaths that you'll die at your desk and bill 3,000 hours a year. Like I say, we wouldn't hire anyone if that was the case, or we'd hire liars if that was the case. We are looking for someone who will be more or less full-time for that first couple of year window to kind of explore their options and see where they are. But for us to turn down somebody, again, a woman who is 8th in her class, who has 2 small children, who has a significant other who's bright in their own regard, and it's clearly a grade A family situation that's going in the right direction, for us just to say, we won't even call you back because we can't grind 2,400 hours out of you, that's insane. We'll talk with that person about maybe a different salary range, and we'll make it work. It's anyone who knows me knows I'm a sports fan. To draw an analogy, it's now a world of free agency. When I started law school, the Curt Flood case had just come down. Andy Messersmith had just sued baseball to become a free agent and stepped out boldly and said, you can no longer contract for me, and either I sign your contract or I don't play baseball. I should be able to negotiate with the highest bidder after I've served out my contract with you, Dodgers. Absolutely a sea change in baseball. Well, he won that out. Translate that to the legal world. We don't have long-term contracts on these people. We have to structure individual deals. Same thing for compensation. When I started out, it was more or less lockstep. Your class came in, then it went up by $1,500, and it went up by $2,500, all the way up. You made partner, you kind of looked to your left, looked to your right, the gradations were still very tight. Resentments would boil if they got too far apart, although in those days, that's another stark difference. We never talked about what we made. Now, the associates know what they make before I even know, and I'm the guy that's supposed to be telling them. So it's just a new world. Okay, do I sit there and commiserate about it? I did for a while, but now it's just reality. So you deal with it. Now the gradations get real open right away. I mean, we just announced our raises for the coming year. We had to have our finger in the wind in terms of what the new incoming salaries were. We look right away. I mean, 1 year into practice, who's hitting on all cylinders, who isn't as much. We award the people who are producing. We don't penalize the people who aren't, but it's not just a lockstep world. If somebody has chosen a lifestyle where they're making much more money for the enterprise and are there all hours, they're going to make more their next year. And the gradations really get big. 5th, 6th, 7th year, we have 7th, 8th-year lawyers making more money than partners because they've earned it. So it's much more of a free agent, individually negotiated deal than it was 20 years ago.
What about disabled students? How does that work? Not just physically, because that gets the focus, but you've also got now all these, ADD and
Sure.
Physical illness, chronic illnesses, things like that.
Right. Obviously, the law has moved in that direction, as well as reasonable accommodations and the whole ADA panoply and the related acts. I'm not a labor and employment lawyer, so I can't really address that. We try to judge a person on their merits and accept them as they are. Are there positions in the law for folks with various types of disability? Absolutely. Can reasonable accommodations be made for certain types of disabilities? Yes. For all? No. I mean, the cruelest thing you can do is to put somebody who truly, due to their disability, cannot have that comfort, that feet on the ground sense of happiness, just because it's something they read about in a book that they think they want to achieve. You either achieve it or you don't. People with no disabilities whatsoever may not achieve it. I think I tend to recognize that there's people with disabilities who have tremendous talents to bring to the mix, and it's just like anything else we talk about, whether you have kids or not, your gender, your sexual orientation, anything else, you want to look at the person for what they are and whether they will move the enterprise forward globally for what they're going to bring to the table. If you have someone with a physical disability, maybe depending on their own desires and makeup, we've interviewed people who want to be in the front line of trial. So they'll go in and out of court, they'll deal with all the hassles of getting in and out of the courthouse, and everything we non-disabled mobile folks think of easily, they want to deal with that. Others will say, well, my strengths are my analytical skills, and I want client contact, but I am happy coming in and I'll do the best possible legal research and writing for you, and then hand it to you gray-haired guys to go into court and get all the glory arguing it. And that's not just a factor of the disabled persons. That there are a ton of lawyers who feel that way, gang. If you're sitting there going into moot court and your stomach is doing flip-flops and you say, gee, I really love the research and writing and the late-night strategies and the too many cups of coffee where we thought of this statutory argument, but I just am nauseated when it comes to presenting it. There are people who are terrible at doing the analysis and sometimes the research and the writing who hit the ball out of the park in terms of presenting an oral argument. Your enterprise needs both types, so there's a spot for you. So anyway, that's a rough analogy to the folks with various disabilities. As far as ADHD or ADD, I think probably 2/3 of the litigators out there would be diagnosed with that. You know, that was another phenomenon that existed but was never recognized when I was a kid or when I was in law school. Now it's, it's throughout society. I deal with it in the office and in other pursuits I do outside the office, working with younger boys and boys and girls. And you just deal with it. You have clients who you need to be attuned with that. So I guess it's like anything else. You be aware of it and you deal with it, and you try to be non-discriminatory about it.
All right, day in the life. We're going to
Okay.
run out of time, so.
Yeah, the tape's going to run here.
Um,
You want one in
do one now.
1980 and one
Yeah,
now?
Yeah.
All right, let's do both because this will be
Okay.
kind of fun. Okay, 1980.
Oh, actually, hold on. Let me just grab my okay.
Carb Solutions,
Yes,
okay.
okay.
1980. I was a judicial clerk for a year, so let's move to 1981. You walk into the office. All of the management are white males. There were probably, in my incoming class of 5 or 6 people, we were about half and half. No billable hour quotas, no reporting mechanisms for how much you're billing. You did keep your hours, that's how the enterprise billed their clients and collected money, but probably half of those bills were still just value bills, like negotiate and close purchase of Smith property, $10,000. Probably could be proven wrong on this, but ethically, basically, you didn't need to produce your time frames and all of that. It didn't happen, at least, in the early 80s. Many bills rendered with win case, $25,000. No tenths of an hour. But as youngsters, we were just being trained in keeping time, so we all kept our time. But we never were told we weren't billing enough or we were billing too low. We didn't get monthly or weekly reports or anything like that. You are driven 100% by pleasing your master and the thought of the brass ring of partnership, although you have no idea what partnership is or anything. I came from a family with no lawyers in it whatsoever. So you come in, you go for the best, most visible work for the most important partner. You're nice and you're ethical, but you're the loudest bird in the nest in terms of getting that good work. You quickly politically get a view of the landscape as to who the power brokers are in the firm, and you go work for them. If it's your predisposition to want to get into court or do the big corporate deals or do the big real estate transactions, you zero in on the people who are really doing it instead of just the window dressing. You pair up with them. You're available 24 hours. You walk through walls for them. You set aside family life. You hopefully have an understanding spouse, and you just bust your butt all the way through. And that happens to result at the end of the day in a lot of hours being billed. You want to be there with your light on after the partner goes home, and you want to say yes to everything they ask you, and you want to let them know you're available weekends, et cetera, et cetera. That was just the whole mindset then. Totally off from today's world. I mean, people would be shocked to even think that. So that's a day in the life. It's, you look back, and I had a blast doing it, and my colleagues who stayed with it have a blast doing it. I have a blast doing it to this day, although you're able to adjust things as you get a few more years under your belt. Most people didn't get big upstrokes from that and quit, went to public work, left law altogether, went to more medium-sized firms, after a couple years broke out and went on their own where they could adjust their own hours, etc. But that was the big firm mindset in 1981 in Phoenix, Arizona. Now let me translate that to a day in the life now from a young associate's perspective, which I have no foundation to speak of. But now you walk in, management is diverse. Issues are focused upon, as we've talked about, in terms of there being women in the profession, minorities in the profession, in terms of our clients being as often women, in-house institutional lawyers who are delegators, wanting, demanding, even if they don't demand it, it's clear they want a woman on the team that they can relate with. Business dinners where the delegating attorney is in their 20s and they want to talk about the concert of the, Screaming Sheebies, some group I've never even heard of except have my son talk about it. I need a young associate there to rap with them about the group because, I want to talk about Bachman-Turner Overdrive or something. So the world nowadays is it's a more diverse group that you're working with. Billable hours control a lot. You have quotas you have to meet. You get everything is input on computers. You get computer reports weekly, if not weekly, at least monthly. You are ranked where you're billing compared to your compatriots. Evaluations tend to focus on how you're billing and where your billable hours are. At the end of the year, hours are looked at first, and then kind of how you're progressing are looked at. So unfortunately, and we're kind of coming away from this for the reasons I've stated, but in the 20 years, the focus has shifted from just demonstrating that you want to learn and you want to do good work to how much productive billable dollars you can generate. All with tremendously harmful results to the profession. And we're changing, we're coming back, which is one of the things I celebrate about the new outlook on things. Now let's talk about a day in my life, how it's changed. This is what everyone can look forward to 20 years from now. Okay, you heard about the walking through walls, not having any client contact, just looking for the sexy work and work that could get me into court to polish my skills there. Okay, now I come in, there are 3 people milling around waiting for me. One comes in, she's a paralegal in our group. She's going to quit to open up a consulting agency for nonprofits. We shed tears, I wish her well, she gives me a resignation letter, she goes off. Next person zips in, I don't like my secretary. She's doing this and this to me, change it. Okay, thanks. Next person zips in, I need to take some time off, my mom is dying. Arrange it for me. Okay, fine. Okay, it's 9:30, the phone's ringing off the hook. There's 20 messages from clients. Where's this motion? Where's this draft brief? Tony Massaro on the line. We need to meet and go through the fundraising targets for the big firms. Remember, you've got a board meeting tonight with the Game and Fish Department on a wildlife initiative you're involved in. You've got a scout meeting, and we've got that big presentation to a potential new client tomorrow. Okay, you stumble into lunch. It's a beauty contest lunch for an institutional bank that's interviewing you to choose you versus 4 other law firms that made the short list. So you're geared up and you're trying to put your best foot forward to tell them what horsepower you can muster within your particular group. And sometimes they are focused only on what schools everyone went to. Sometimes they focus exclusively on what we're talking about here. What's your firm really like? What type of people are you attracting? What's your culture? What's your atmosphere? Then you come back, you shut off the phone, and maybe you actually work for a couple of hours doing law. But it's 5-minute bursts of things, and it tends to be editing briefs and work product that younger lawyers have done that you've assigned in your mentoring. And you try to eke out the time to do what you used to appreciate when you were a young lawyer, and that's get some feedback. So you call someone in and you say, this actually happened yesterday morning. Let's look at this paragraph you wrote in this pleading. Party A decided to sell and party B agreed to buy the parcel described as blah, blah, blah. You draw a red line through that and you say, A sold the property to B. And you explain to the person that you took 36 words and you changed it to 8. And the trial judge, who has 1,200 cases she's responsible for, will appreciate you for having used 8 words instead of 20, and you're not using passive voice, and you're communicating the concept more clearly. Okay, now go back and redo it and come back with no sentence longer than 20 words, blah, blah, blah. Person leaves, try to do it in such a way they don't feel crushed. And you get a couple demand letters out, and you sign off on a couple lawsuits, and then it's 4 o'clock. Kids are home from school. I try to check in. They call me, Dad, the truck's broken again. Will you buy me a new truck? No. Go get it fixed. The usual things flurrying around. Finally, and there's also a component of East Coast calls early and then West Coast calls late because of the time frames. I sometimes try to sneak in at 7, but it's already 10 o'clock on the East Coast. So a lot of the institutional clients will be calling, where's this, where's that? So it goes from doing the work at that part of the food chain to trying to manage people doing the work, all benignly and kindly, but with not a lot of time to do it. Also, gain new clients, keep the current clients happy. As you get a few years into it, if you choose to do it, your number will come up in terms of firm administration, which isn't just filling out reports, it's dealing with crying people in your office. It's telling an associate that despite their best efforts, they are routinely disappointing the clients, putting the firm at risk for malpractice, and it just ain't working out. And we need to develop an exit strategy in a humane way to get them on their way. And then this time of year, an absolute delight is in the middle of all this, knock, 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 here's Sally Jones, recruit from U of A, who we called back from campus, and she thinks she wants to be a litigator, she wants to meet you. Come in, have a half-hour meeting. That's why we seem so scattered when you guys are interviewing with us. 7:30, 8 o'clock, okay, you've got a hockey game with X International Bank, they're in town and they like hockey. So you go to the hockey game, you get home at 11:30, say hello to the wife, talk about what's happened, start all over again the next day. That's pretty much the life. I absolutely love it. It's a blast. Interspersed in there, I absolutely mandate that I'm still trying suits. I just had a 3.5 week trial in court constantly. And it's just a very fast-paced, unorganized existence where you need to have great depth of talent to help you to do actually the work that you're often presenting. And that's what's so crucial during recruiting is to, again, it comes back to I'm looking for people. Everyone's going to be smart. Everyone's going to be able to write if they can unclog their brain of some of this stuff they pick up. I want people who will have that fire in their belly, who will want to assist me and the other partners in the firm to do that work to make the enterprise move forward and all look good, who will be happy in what they're doing, who aren't there because somebody else pressed them into it, who I think there's a reasonable prospect that I'll get a good chunk of their time for some long-term period. I'm no longer focused on dying at the desk, because that just isn't going to happen anymore. But the best result, and there's several people who are in this category, I'm proud to say, and it's the happiest thing I can have accomplished in the law, is people you recruited in the 80s who are now your partners and who are enjoying life, and you're seeing their kids grow up, and they've stayed with you all these years. That's the goal you're trying to get to, but it's a pretty hard goal to meet. So that's a glimpse at the day in the life. Did I ever take a business course? No. I took Psych 1A as a freshman. This is all psychology and human relations and communications. It's like zero memorizing the 5 ways to revoke a will, and what color of suit to wear in Greenlee County on Tuesdays. But you don't know that now, so you have a big a big learning curve ahead of you. But just accept it for what it is. It's fun. Make good money along the way. You meet fascinating people. You can travel the world if you want, and you just have to kind of take it for what it is and try to have some degree of control over it. Be willing to be flexible. Recognize that if it's not working out, to move into something else, and there's no disdain in that, and move forward. The only other thing I'd say that really makes it work is to, and I got this advice early on and it was a lifesaver, is to force yourself to do things outside the strict construct of the law in research and writing and arguing and litigating or doing deals or merging corporations. Get involved early on in the Bar Association and the Young Lawyers Division. If pro bono type of stuff really gives you a lot of pleasure, get on the volunteer lawyer list, take some pro bono cases. Eventually you will feel a calling to come back to the school and give back to you. Dive into that.
What do you mean by that?
I was, as I said, totally backbench sort of person. Most of my buddies were too. We kind of schlumped through school and got out. Never really active in any of the student societies or PAD or anything like that. Didn't do 2080, or whatever it is now, the practice where you go and hook up with an agency and do practical type work. It was Rule 2080 back in my day. I worked. I went to work for a firm violating all law school regulations, made $3.50 an hour and worked 25 hours a week while I was in second, third year, and learned a lot, but it was more on the practical side than it was on the philosophical side, so I don't know how it really helped me. But it allowed me to feed myself, I guess, going through school. When you get out into practice, although it's the last thing you think you want to do and that you have time to do, try to get out of that mode of just walking through walls and billing, and being all things to all people. You'll be happier, you'll be better grounded and more comfortable, and you'll be ultimately of more value to our clients if you get on a panel with judges and get to know the judges as people in revising the rules, or running law day, or running a law symposium at a senior citizens home, or in terms of giving back to the school. I didn't do a thing for the school. I didn't even write them a check for 10 years. I was introduced to Tom Sullivan in the late 80s. The first day he landed on the ground, I was active in the County Bar Association, and I was in charge of a convention we were having up here. Somebody said, why don't you invite the new dean from U of A up? Met him, struck up a friendship with he and Susan. Very cleverly, he said, well, why don't you go on this commission and this board and this committee? And that led to what really now has been a 12, 13-year run of work kind of on call to the various deans in primarily fundraising, introducing them to the heads of the big firms in Phoenix, making presentations to the lawyers about how important it is for us to have a good law school here, really here and in Tempe as well, how that dealing with the legislature who wants to, from time to time, defund the schools, because over the years you pick up connections, and it will mean more to have a graduate who knows the legislators because of working with them on client matters go out and lobby them on how important the law school is, what it means societally, and to disabuse the legislatures of the stereotypical images. And then eventually that led to officership positions in the LCA, and I served as president a couple of years ago. Got to know Joel, as I've already told you a little bit. Tony is my age. She wasn't on campus when I was there. I didn't know her from Adam, except everyone loved her. So now being able to work with her closely has just been an absolute joy. But now I deal with the frustrations of trying to get my colleagues off of their duffs to write checks or get involved. And several have taken Jim Rogers' lead and has given of what they can, others haven't. But that gets you all over the state, all over the country, meeting with people, writing letters on the phone, and again, just increasing the fabric of enriching communications and learning what people are doing with their lives rather than just focusing on what the billable hours are. None of those hours are billable.
So, for students who will be getting out, in terms of the idea of giving, it seems like what you're saying is that money is important to give, but also your connections to other places that can help the school or help sort of further things is also another way of giving. I thought maybe you could just, Vicki will be very happy with this.
Yes, I'm reading off her script here.
Right. Maybe you could give a couple of suggestions on different ways of giving that people wouldn't necessarily think of.
Sure. Part of building an alumni tie is just a feeling of belonging. It's not writing the checks necessarily. Now the biggest challenge you students are going to face, I didn't face. We still had a well-funded public university and law school 20 years ago. That's no longer the case. The budget crunches, and my wife's a school teacher, I mean, they now have no music teacher, no art teacher. She's a librarian. She teaches 6 classes a day. It's no longer in elementary school, it's no longer the staff of 3 kindly ladies in the library you go into and everything's covered. It's just societally we are just going down the wrong path. That's happening in law school. People don't realize that. The extent of public funding is plummeting while our tax bite is getting lower at the state level, so everyone celebrates that. They don't realize the impact on welfare, on TANF recipients, on just the social fabric of the country and legal aid and what all that means. It's really, really deepening the despair out there, and it's going to result in some huge changes, some of which we've seen already on an international perspective. Okay, back to your question. Sorry about that. It is going to be up to each of us as alumni and you guys as students to bridge that gap if we want our school to continue to exist. We have to plan as if public funding is going to go down. We have to plan as if we politically keep our ties with the main university positive as they've been, that we get all the money that's coming to us, but there's going to be a kind of a delta, a gap there that we have to meet. Okay, there's only so many Jim Rogers that step up and just feel something in their heart to step up and give that amount of money to our school. We need to deepen the fabric of people who feel an obligation to give back to an institution that in some way, although you never thought so at the time, and I still can't adequately describe why it happened, built you into what you are, and the quality of life you have and financial success you have and everything else. And candidly, the way to do that is to write checks. That's the only way to make up the difference. Okay, as beginning lawyers, maybe going to work for a public agency, going to work for a small firm, opening your own shop, going in-house with somebody, or using your law degree in private industry, not in the traditional practice of law, it's going to be tough for the first several years. Struggling debt loads, I mean, I read all the statistics. To write checks, what can I do? Write a check for $25 a year. Stay on the mailing list. At least have some degree of tie so that you are getting the newsletters, you're getting the invites to the annual dinner. Avail yourself of your time. Keep in touch with the school. There's any number of ways. Vicki Fleischer, Dean Massaro, others can integrate you. Join the Board of Visitors. Speak your mind on curriculum. Speak your mind on faculty searches, dean searches when they come up. And get involved in that way. Join the debate of whether the school should be more practical or more philosophical. Interface with the community. I know the dean has launched a series of just lunches and dinners with other walks of life and professions to say, hey, we're training lawyers, what can we do to turn out better people? You can join the Law College Association. We're striving to wash out the deadwood window dressing, folks who aren't producing, and we love young people. We love diverse people to help us be a little more relevant to the 0 to 10-year graduates. We're already populated with the fuddy-duddies. We need younger people, and then those ties will. And if you translate that enthusiasm to people, if we can get 50% of our younger grads writing checks for $25 or $50 or $100, we're better off than having 5% writing checks for $500. And then that leverages into, as their incomes grow and their human nature is such that they begin to actually realize they got some good out of the place, that will plant the seeds for more money to come in the future, and that'll help bridge that gap, hopefully.
And how much should they be giving once they get to your level, when they're in charge of everybody?
You really are focusing on Vicki's approach. Here's the best way I think somebody 20, 25 years out who has developed some meager connections in the legal world can help contribute. First off, let's leverage that into enhancing giving by everybody. Okay, how do you do that? Well, Tony Massaro was unknown to the managing partners in every big Phoenix firm. Most of them had a budget line item to give $25,000, $10,000, $1,000, and if you don't ring that chime, they've got other pressures. They'll give it to the Phoenix Opera or something. You can work to get the school known in front of each of those firms. Work with, and in Tucson as well, and throughout the state, throughout the western U.S., in LA, for example, in San Francisco. Work with your peers to, the school will come out and give a presentation as to what's going on campus. Here's the incoming profile of our new class. They're a lot smarter than you guys were. Here's the new professor we just hired away from Michigan. Here's our new physical build out. Here's what's happening in Rogers Roundtree, whatever. That will get enthusiasm going among the people who have just become disconnected over the years. And if I can use some of my connections to develop a 10-year pledge of $150,000 and then every year keep gently reminding those firms to cut the checks, we're that much further ahead. And starting with Tom and then through Joel and now Tony, we've been able to accomplish that with a lot of the firms. Our firm, which at the time had like 4 U of A graduates in our Phoenix office, decided to sponsor the video conferencing room because we're very much into technology and we thrive on video conferencing and all of our offices being interconnected as such. That was $75,000. Our firm has a policy where the firm itself doesn't write checks. It's up to the individuals to write checks. So what do? Well, you'll have to shield this part of the tape from anyone in our headquarters ever watching it. We pull a chunk out of the firm as recruiting. We pull a chunk out as charitable contribution, and then I go hat in hand, door to door, to the Vanderbilt grads, the Duke grads, the UVA grads, the Case Western grads, and say, you got to write a check for $250 to the U of A because We want our name on the door, and we want to have a good cachet down there, and we want the best and the brightest to come want to interview at Bryan Cave. And by matching all that together, we've been able to give between 8 and 10 grand a year for the last 5 or 6 years to meet our pledge. So you can do a lot of that without necessarily writing the checks. Where should your checks be? Well, I'm a member of, what do we call it, the Dean's, Friends of the Dean, another label Tony and I came up with. That requires, I think, a minimum of $1,000 a year up to $5,000. Then there's the Jim Rogers of the world that have another, I think it's the Dean's Council, that's $5,000 and up. I have a number of other pursuits going. I just as soon not give $5,000 to any one of them, but I'm comfortable giving in the $1,000 to $5,000 range, and I keep getting pressure to keep moving that up, and I generally do move it up because I'm feeling more and more connection with the school. So that's the answer to the question, but you know what? We don't need every 1980 grad to give $2,500. We need, let's say we have 10% of the grads giving something. We need 50% of the grads giving $500, which 20 years out is something that people should be able to do. That just deepens the leverage and gets everybody feeling a little more involved. So that's the direction I'd like to challenge everybody watching this to be in, because pretty soon you'll wake up and you'll be 20 years out and you won't have realized where all the time went, and the school will still be where it is and will still need your help desperately, and start to build those connections now when $50 or $100 smarts a little bit. Pretty soon that can be $500, $1,000, $1,500, $2,500, and for the people, and I'm just a lowly lawyer. My only stock in trade is time. There's only so many hours I can bill, and as you've learned, those are shrinking because I'm taking on more administrative responsibilities and client getting responsibilities. The people who make the money don't practice law. They practice law in conjunction with buying a broadcast license like Jim Rogers, or they do real estate development, or they become heads of industry in the high-tech world or various institutions, or they go off and do something else. We've built a network where we'll go tap those people. We'll go back and meet Milton O. Reapy, who was a humble trial lawyer back in the Midwest, have a couple martinis with him, as Tom and Joel did, and he passes away, and we funded a bunch of scholarships. Don't feel like you need to be the Jim Rogers of the world. It's a big hurdle people have that, how could I even pretend to touch that? I won't give anything. Write a check for $500. It's tax deductible. Yeah, it hurts, but get it in the computer as being get it on your Quicken schedule that it's an annual check you're going to write, and then it becomes more painless, and build that connection with the school. So that's my commentary on that point.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, last question. We got there. The last question.
Okay.
Happiest moment.
Hang on a second, I got 10 seconds. Tapes, 1 second.
I'm going to change the tape.